Two neighbors who share the same ancestry, a common history, speak nearly the same language, follow the same church, yet often seem to find themselves at odds with each other. Russia and Ukraine. Here's how these two nations have descended into an inevitably recurring conflict rooted in centuries-long disputes, threatening the prospect of peace and security in the region and the world alike.
Vladimir Putin has just addressed the Russian people moments ago, announcing what Putin called the start of a military special operation, in his words, to demilitarize Ukraine.
Overview about the Ukrainian political system. Ukraine is a unitary, sovereign and independent, democratic, social and legal state, a parliamentary presidential republic. The people are the bearer of sovereignty and the only source of power in Ukraine. The people exercise power directly and through state authorities and local self-government bodies. The power in Ukraine is carried out according to the principle of its division into legislative, executive, and judicial. The executive power in the country belongs to the Cabinet of Ministers, and legislative power to the Parliament, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine. The supreme body of the judiciary in Ukraine is the Supreme Court of Ukraine. Overview about the Russian political system. The politics of Russia take place in the framework of the Federal Semi-Presidential Republic of Russia. According to the Constitution of Russia, the President of Russia is the head of state and of a multi-party system with executive power exercised by the government, headed by the Prime Minister, who is appointed by the President with the Parliament's approval. Legislative power is vested in the two houses of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, while the President and the government issue numerous legally binding laws. Historical relationship between Russia and Ukraine. Both Russia and Ukraine claim their heritage from Kievan Rus, a polity that united most of the East Slavic and some Finnish tribes and adopted Byzantine Orthodoxy in the 9th to 11th centuries. According to Old Rus chronicles, Kiev, the capital of modern Ukraine, was proclaimed the mother of Rus cities as it was the capital of the powerful late medieval state of Rus. The Russian Empire considered Ukrainians and Belarusians to be ethnically Russians, and referred to them as Little Russians. Until the end of World War I, this view was only opposed by a small group of Ukrainian nationalists. Nevertheless, a perceived threat of Ukrainian separatism set in motion a set of measures aimed at the justification of the Little Russians. In 1804, the Ukrainian language was banned from schools as a subject and language of instruction. In 1876, Alexander II's Secretary M's Ukaz prohibited the publication and importation of most Ukrainian language books, public performances and lectures in the Ukrainian language, and even the printing of Ukrainian texts accompanying musical scores. After the Soviet military aggression by the Soviet government at the beginning of 1918, Ukraine declared its full independence from the Russian Republic on 22 January 1918 as the Ukrainian People's Republic, which existed from 1917 to 1922. The two treaties of Brest-Litovsk that Ukraine and Russia signed separately with the Central Powers calmed the military conflict between them, and peace negotiations were initiated the same year. After the end of World War I, Ukraine became a battleground in the Ukrainian War of Independence linked to the Russian Civil War. Both Russians and Ukrainians fought in nearly all armies based on personal political beliefs. In 1922, Ukraine and Russia were two of the founding members of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics and were the signatories of the treaty that terminated the Union in December 1991. The end of the Russian Empire also ended the ban of the Ukrainian language. This was followed by a period of Korenizatsiya that promoted the cultures of the different Soviet republics.
Мною принято решение о проведении специальной военной операции.
Putin called this a special military operation, but it's clear this is a full-scale invasion.
Current relationship between Russia and Ukraine. After the dissolution of the Soviet Union, Ukraine gained its independence and inherited the third largest nuclear stockpile in the world, along with significant means of its design and production. The country had 130 UR-100N intercontinental ballistic missiles (ICBM) with 6 warheads each, 46 RT-23 Molodets ICBMs with 10 warheads apiece, as well as 33 heavy bombers, totaling approximately 1,700 warheads remained on Ukrainian territory. In 1992, Ukraine agreed to voluntarily remove over 3,000 tactical nuclear weapons, following the signing of the 1994 Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances among the US, the UK, and Russia, as well as similar agreements with France and China. Ukraine agreed to destroy the rest of its nuclear weapons and to join the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of the Nuclear Weapons. By 1996, Ukraine transferred all Soviet-era strategic warheads to Russia.
Major dispute of the early years was over the fate of the Black Sea Fleet as well as its operating bases, mainly Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. The issue was exacerbated by political posturing, Ukrainian proclamation that the entire fleet was under Russia's jurisdiction and intention to pursue a NATO membership action plan, followed by Russian politicians' expressions of territorial claims over parts of Crimea and declaration by Russian parliament that the 1954 gifting of Crimea to Ukraine was illegitimate, making the peninsula an ongoing issue in negotiations. After several years of intense negotiations, the whole issue was resolved in 1997. The partition treaty divided the fleet and allowed Russia to lease some of the naval bases in Sevastopol to the Russian Navy until 2017, extended to 2042 with the Kharkiv Pact, and the Treaty of Friendship fixed the principle in strategic partnership that the recognition of the inviolability of existing borders, the respect for territorial integrity, and a mutual commitment not to use its territory to harm the security of each other. Another major dispute was related to the energy supplies, as several Soviet Western Europe oil and gas pipelines ran through Ukraine. After new treaties came into effect, Ukraine gas debts arrears to Russia were paid off by transfer of some nuclear-capable weapons that Ukraine inherited from the USSR to Russia, such as Tu-160 strategic bombers. All the disputes prior to the 2002 Ukrainian presidential election were present, including the speculations regarding accidental shooting down of a Russian airliner by the Ukrainian military and the controversy with the Tavza Island. Relations with Russia under the latter years of Leonid Kuchma improved. In 2002, the Russian government participated in financing the construction of the Khmelnytsky and the Rivne nuclear power plants. In 2003, Russia attempted to integrate Ukraine into a new Russian-led single economic space with Russia. However, with President Viktor Yushchenko in power, several problems resurfaced, including the Russia-Ukraine gas disputes due to Ukraine's growing cooperation with the EU and bid to join NATO. Further worsening of the relations was provoked by belligerent statements made in 2007 to 2008 by both the Russian Foreign Ministry, the mayor of Moscow Yuri Lavskov, and the President Vladimir Putin, and the Ukrainian politicians, the former Foreign Minister Boris Tarasyuk, Deputy Justice Minister of Ukraine Ivan Kornichuk, and the leader of parliamentary opposition's Yulia Tymoshenko. In February 2008, Russia unilaterally withdrew from the Ukrainian-Russian Intergovernmental Agreement on the main Center for Missile Attack Warning signed in 1997. On October 2008, Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin accused Ukraine of supplying arms to Georgia during the Russo-Georgian War. Putin also claimed that Moscow had evidence proving that Ukrainian military experts were present in the conflict zone during the war. Ukraine has denied the allegations. Prosecutor General of Ukraine Alexander Medvedko confirmed on September 25, 2009 that no personnel of Ukrainian armed forces participated in 2008 Russo-Georgian War. No weapons or military equipment of the Ukrainian armed forces were present at the conflict, and no help was given to the Georgian side. The U.S. supported Ukraine's bid to join NATO, launched in January 2008 as an effort to obtain NATO membership action plan. Russia strongly opposed any prospect of Ukraine and Georgia becoming NATO members. During January 2009 dispute over natural gas prices, exports of Russian natural gas through Ukraine were shut. Relations further deteriorated when Russian Prime Minister Putin during this dispute said that Ukrainian political leadership is demonstrating its inability to solve economic problems. During the conflict, the Russian media almost uniformly portrayed Ukraine as an aggressive and greedy state that wanted to ally with Russia's enemies and exploit cheap Russian gas. In a leaked U.S. diplomatic cable, as revealed by WikiLeaks, regarding the January 2009 Russian-Ukrainian gas crisis, the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, was quoting Ambassador of Ukraine to Russia, Konstantin Hiroshenko, as expressing his opinion that Kremlin leaders wanted to see a totally subservient person in charge in Kyiv, and that Putin hated the then-President Yushchenko and had a low personal regard for Yanukovych, but saw then-Prime Minister Tymoshenko as someone perhaps not that he can trust, yet with whom he could deal. On 11th August 2009, Russian President Dmitry Medvedev posted a video blog on the Kremlin.ru website and the official Kremlin Live Journal blog, in which he criticized Yushchenko for what Medvedev claimed was the Ukrainian president's responsibility in the souring of Russia-Ukraine relations and the anti-Russian position of the current Ukrainian authorities. Medvedev further announced that he could not send a new ambassador to Ukraine until there was an improvement in the relationship. In response, Yushchenko wrote a letter which noted he could not agree that the Ukrainian-Russian relations had run into problems and wondered why the Russian president completely ruled out the Russian responsibility for this. Analysts said Medvedev's message was timed to influence the campaign for the 2010 Ukrainian presidential election.
On October 7, 2009, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russian government wanted to see economy prevail in Russian-Ukrainian relations and that relations between the two countries would improve if the two countries set up joint ventures, especially in small and medium-sized businesses. At the same meeting in Kharkiv, Lavrov said that Russian government would not respond to a Ukrainian proposal to organize a meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian presidents, but that contacts between the two countries' foreign ministries are being maintained permanently. On December 2, 2009, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Petro Poroshenko and Lavrov agreed on gradually abandoning the compilation of lists of individuals banned from entering their countries. According to Taras Kuzho, Viktor Yanukovych was the most pro-Russian and neo-Soviet president to have been elected in Ukraine. Since his election, he fulfilled all the demands laid out by Russian President Dmitry Medvedev in his letter written to former President Viktor Yushchenko in August 2009. On April 22, 2010, Presidents Viktor Yanukovych and Dmitry Medvedev signed an agreement concerning renting of the Russian naval forces based in Sevastopol in the next 25 years for the natural gas discounts in deliveries, which accounted for $100 per each 1,000 cubic meters. The lease extension agreement was highly controversial in and outside of Ukraine. On May 17, 2010, the President, Dmitry Medvedev, arrived in Kyiv on a 2-day visit. During the visit, Medvedev hoped to sign cooperation agreements in inter-regional and international problems, according to RIA Novosti. That was also mentioned on the official inquiry at the Verkhovna Rada by the first Vice Prime Minister Andrei Koyev. According to some news agencies, the main purpose of the visit was to solve the disagreement in the Russian-Ukrainian energy relations after Viktor Yanukovych agreed on the partial merger of Gazprom and Naftogaz. Apart from the merger of the state gas companies, there are also talks of the merger of the nuclear energy sectors as well. Both Russian President Dmitry Medvedev April 2010 and Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin June 2010 have stated they noticed a big improvement in relations since Viktor Yanukovych's presidency. On May 14, 2013, an unknown veteran of unknown intelligence service, Sergei Razumovsky, a leader of the All-Ukrainian Association of Homeless Officers, who resides in Ukraine, under the Ukrainian flag calls on the creation of Ukrainian, Russian international volunteer brigades in support of the Bashar al-Assad government in Syria to fight rebels. One of the reasons why Razumovsky wants to create such brigades is the fact that government of Ukraine does not support its officer corps. Because of that, Razumovsky has intentions to apply for citizenship in Syria. Some sources claim that he is a Kremlin's provocateur. On July 17, 2013, near the Russian coast of the Sea of Azov, which is considered as internal waters of both Russia and Ukraine, the Russian Coast Guard patrol boat collided with a Ukrainian fishing vessel. 4 fishermen died, while one was detained by Russian authorities on the charges of poaching. According to the surviving fishermen, their boat was rammed by the Russians, and the fishermen were fired at as well, while the Russian law enforcement agency claimed that it was the poachers who tried to ram into the patrol vessel. The Minister of Justice of Ukraine, Olena Lukash, acknowledged that Russia has no jurisdiction to prosecute the detained citizen of Ukraine. The surviving fisherman was expected to be released to Ukraine before 12 August 2013. However, the prosecutor office of Russia chose to keep the Ukrainian detained in Russia. Another incident took place on the border between Belgorod and Luhansk Oblast, when an apparently inebriated Russian tractor driver decided to cross the border to Ukraine along with his 2 friends on August 28, 2013. Unlike the Azov incident that took place a month earlier on July 17, 2013, the State Border Service of Ukraine handed over the citizens of Russia right back to the Russian authorities. Tractor Belarus was taken away and handed over to the Ministry of Revenues and Duties. In 2013, Ukraine but pursued an observer status in the Russian-led Customs Union of Belarus, Kazakhstan, and Russia, as well as persisted with moving along with association agreement with the EU, scheduled to sign in November. On August 14, 2013, the Russian Customs Service stopped all goods coming from Ukraine. Some politicians saw that as a start of a trade war against Ukraine to prevent Ukraine from signing a trade agreement with the European Union. According to Pavlo Klemkin, one of the Ukrainian negotiators of the association agreement, initially the Russians simply did not believe the association agreement with the EU could come true. They didn't believe in our ability to negotiate a good agreement and didn't believe in our commitment to implement a good agreement. In September 2013, Russia warned Ukraine that if it went ahead with a planned agreement on free trade with the EU, it would face financial catastrophe and possibly the collapse of the state. Sergei Glaziev, advisor to President Vladimir Putin, said that Ukrainian authorities make a huge mistake if they think that the Russian reaction will become neutral in a few years from now. This will not happen. Russia had already imposed import restriction on certain Ukrainian products, and Glaziev did not rule out further sanctions if the agreement was signed. Glosiv allowed for the possibility of separatist movements springing up in the Russian-speaking east and south of Ukraine. On November 21, 2013, Yanukovych suspended preparations for signing the EU Association Agreement. This is to seek closer economic relations with Russia. On December 17, 2013, Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to lend Ukraine $15 billion in financial aid and a 33% discount on natural gases. The treaty was signed amid massive ongoing protests in Ukraine for closer ties between Ukraine and the European Union. Critics pointed out that in the months before the 17 December 2013 deal, a change in the Russian custom regulations on imports from Ukraine was a Russian attempt to prevent Ukraine to sign an association agreement with the European Union.
Annexation of Crimea and war in eastern Ukraine. The 2014 Crimean crisis was unfolding in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea in the aftermath of the February 2014 Ukrainian Revolution, in which the government of Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted. Protests were staged by groups of mainly ethnic Russians who opposed the events in Kyiv and wanted close ties or integration with Russia, in addition to expanded autonomy or possible independence for Crimea. Other groups, including Crimean Tatars, protested in support of the revolution. On 27 February, unmarked military men wearing masks seized a number of important buildings in Crimea, including the Parliament building and two airports. Under siege, the Supreme Council of Crimea dismissed the Autonomous Republic's government and replaced Chairman of the Council of Ministers of Crimea, Anatoly Mohyliov, with Sergei Aksyonov. Ukraine accused Russia of intervening in Ukraine's internal affairs, while the Russian side officially denied such claims. In response to the crisis, the Ukrainian parliament requested that the Budapest Memorandum signatories reaffirm their commitment to the principles enshrined in the political agreement, and further asked that they hold consultations with Ukraine to ease tensions. So on March 1, without declaration of war, the Russian parliament granted President Vladimir Putin the authority to use military force in Ukraine. And on the same day, the acting president of Ukraine, Alexander Turchynov, decreed the appointment of the Prime Minister of Crimea as unconstitutional. He said, "We consider the behavior of the Russian Federation to be direct aggression against the sovereignty of Ukraine." In mid-March, after a disputed local referendum, Russia recognized Crimea as a sovereign state and proceeded to formally annex the peninsula. The Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the provisional principal of Russia in Ukraine to present note verbally of protests against Russia's recognition of the Republic of Crimea and its subsequent annexation. So 2 days later, the Verkhovna Rada condemned the treaty and called Russia's actions a gross violation of international law. So Ukraine responded with sanctions against Russia, as well as blacklisting and freezing assets of numerous individuals and entities involved with the annexation. So Ukraine started a campaign not to buy Russian products, and other countries supporting Ukraine's position to follow the similar measures. So Russia responded with similar measures against Ukraine and its supporters, but did not publicly reveal the list of people or entities sanctioned. On March 19, 2014, all Ukrainian armed forces were withdrawn from Crimea. On April 8, 2014, an agreement was reached between Russia and Ukraine to return interned vessels to Ukraine and for the withdrawal of an undisclosed number of Ukrainian aircraft seized in Crimea. So Russia returned 35 ships that had been impounded during its annexation of Crimea, but unilaterally suspended the return of Ukrainian Navy materials from Crimea to Ukraine proper because Ukraine did not renew its unilaterally declared ceasefire on July 1, 2014 in the war in Donbas. so 16 minor ships are hence yet to return to Ukraine proper. And on March 27, 2016, Dmitry Kozak was appointed to greatly strengthen Crimea's social, political, and economic ties to Russia. On April 14, Russian President Putin announced that he would open a ruble-only account with Bank Rossiya and would make it the primary bank in the newly annexed Crimea, as well as giving the right to service payments on Russia's $36 billion wholesale electricity market, which gave the bank $112 million annually from the commission charges alone. On April 15, the Verkhovna Rada declared the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and Sevastopol to be under provisional occupation by the Russian military. The territories were also deemed inalienable parts of Ukraine, subject to Ukrainian law. On March 19, 2014, all Ukrainian armed forces were withdrawn from Crimea. On April 17, 2014, President Putin stated that the Russian military had backed Crimean separatist militias, stating that Russia's intervention was necessary to ensure proper conditions for the people of Crimea to be able to freely express their will. Throughout March and April 2014, pro-Russian unrest spread in Ukraine, with pro-Russian groups proclaiming People's Republics in the Oblast of Donetsk and Luhansk as of 2017, both partially outside the control of Ukrainian government. On July 17, 2014, Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 was shut down by a Buk surface-to-air missile launch from pro-Russian separatist-controlled territory in Ukraine. All 283 passengers and 15 crew were killed. Military clashes between pro-Russian rebels and the armed forces of Ukraine began in the Donbas region in April 2014. On September 5, 2014, the Ukrainian government and representatives of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic signed a tentative truce, or a ceasefire, the agreement. So the ceasefire imploded amidst intense new fighting in January 2015. A new ceasefire agreement has operated since mid-February 2015, but this agreement also failed to stop the fighting. Russia has been accused by NATO and Ukraine of engaging in direct military operations to support the Donetsk People's Republic and the Luhansk People's Republic. Russia denies this, but in December 2015, Russian Federation President Vladimir Putin admitted that Russian military intelligence officers were operating in Ukraine, insisting though that they were not the same as regular troops. So Russia has admitted that Russian volunteers are helping the separatist People's Republic. At June 26, 2014, session of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko stated that bilateral relations with Russia cannot be normalized unless Russia undoes its unilateral annexation of Crimea and returns its control of Crimea to Ukraine. In February 2015, Ukraine ended a 1997 agreement that Russians can enter Ukraine with international ID instead of a travel passport.
In February 2015, the Law on Protection Information, Television and Radio Space of Ukraine banned the showing on Ukrainian television of audiovisual works that contain the popularization, allegation for propaganda of any action of law enforcement agencies, the armed forces, other armed, military or security forces, the occupier states, was enacted. 1 year later, Russian production of Ukrainian television had ceased by 3 to 4 times. Early in March 2014 and prior to its independence referendum, all broadcast of Ukraine-based TV channels was suspended in Crimea. Later that month, the Ukrainian Television Council for TV and Radio Broadcasting ordered measures against some Russian TV channels which were accused of broadcasting misleading information about Ukraine. 15 more Russian TV channels were banned in March 2016. In May 2015, Ukraine suspended the military cooperation agreement with Russia that was placed since 1993. Following a breakdown in mutual business ties, Ukraine also seized the supply of components that were used in production of military equipment by Russia. In no-goes, Russia announced that it will be banned the import of Ukrainian agricultural goods from January 2016. In October 2015, Ukraine banned all direct flights between Ukraine and Russia. In November 2015, Ukraine closed its airspace to all Russian military and civil airplanes. In December 2015, Ukrainian lawmakers voted to place a trade embargo on Russia, retaliation of Blatter's cancellation of two countries' free trade zone and ban on the food imports as the free trade agreement between the European Union and Ukraine is to come into force in January 2016. Russia imposes tariffs of Ukrainian goods from January 2016 as Ukraine joins the deep and comprehensive free trade area with the EU. Since 2015, Russia is banning Russian artists from entering Ukraine and also banning other Russian works of culture from Russia when they were considered a threat to national security. Russia did not reciprocate. Russia Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov responded by saying that Moscow should not be like Kiev and should not impose blacklists and restriction of natural figures of Ukraine. Lavrov did not add the Russian producers and the film industry should not take into account friendly attacks of foreign performers in Russia when implementing cultural projects with them. On October 5, 2016, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine officially recommended that its citizens should avoid travel to Russia, claiming Russian law enforcers' growing number of groundless arrests of Ukrainian citizens and they often routinely treat Ukrainians, use illegally methods of physical and psychological pressure, torture, and other acts that violate human dignity. In June 14, 2018, a resolution on Russia, the European Parliament claimed that were 71 illegally detained Ukrainian citizens in Russia and on the Crimean Peninsula. In February 2017, the Ukrainian government banned the commercial importation of books from Russia, which had accounted for up to 60% of titles sold in Ukraine, following the August 2015 ban on the particular titles. Ukraine's 2017 education law makes Ukrainian the only language of primary education in state schools. The law faced criticism from officials in Russia and Hungary. Russia's foreign ministry states the law is designed to forcefully establish a monoethnic language regime in multinational states. On January 18, 2018, the Ukrainian parliament passed a law defining areas by the Donetsk People Republic and the Luhansk People Republic as temporarily occupied by Russia. The law also called Russia an aggressor state. In March 2018, the Ukrainian border guard detained the sail with a Volga flag Crimean-registered fishing vessel north, accusing the crew entering territory which has been under temporary occupation. The captain of the North, Vladimir Kombenko, is facing 5 years in prison. In November 2018, Russia fired upon and seized 3 Ukrainian Navy vessels and imprisoned its 24 sailors in Moscow, off the coast of Crimea, injuring crew members. The event prompted angry protests outside the Russian embassy in Ukraine, and an embassy car was set on fire. Consequently, martial law was imposed for a 30-day period from 26th of November in 10 Ukrainian border oblasts. Martial law was introduced because Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko claimed there was a threat of full-scale war with Russia. During the martial law, Ukraine banned all Russian men between 16 and 60 from entering the country for the period of the martial law, with exception for humanitarian purposes. Ukraine claimed it was a security measure to prevent Russia from forming units of private armies of Ukrainian soil. On December 27, 2018, the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine announced that it has extended that restrictive measure of the State Border Guard Service regarding the entry of Russian men into Ukraine. Between November 26 and December 26, 2018, 1,650 Russian citizens were refused entry to Ukraine. From December 26, 2018 until January 11, 2019, the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine denied 800 Russian citizens access to Ukraine. In 2019, amendments were made to Constitution of Ukraine which enshrine an irreversibility of the country's strategic course towards EU and NATO membership. On July 11, 2019, recently elected Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky held a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, following the former appeals to a Russian leader to take part in talks with Ukraine. The United States, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom in mix. The leader also discussed the exchange of the prisoners held by both sides. On September 7, Ukraine and Russia exchanged prisoners. Russia's state-owned energy company Gazprom and Ukraine's agreed a 5-year deal on Russia gas translated to Europe at the end of 2019.
On February 2, 2021, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky took the decision to shut down pro-Russian TV channels owned by the parliamentary deputy Taras Kozak, who is a close associate of Viktor Medvedchuk, the godfather of the daughter of Russia President Vladimir Putin. Medvedchuk is also said to be the real owner of the pro-Russian TV channels. As part of the ongoing war in Donbas, fighting escalated in the first quarter of 2021, with 25 Ukrainian soldiers dying in the conflict, compared to the 50 that died in 2020 according to Ukrainian authorities. In late March 2021, it was reported that a large movement of military equipment were occurring in various areas within Russia, with the equipment headed to Crimea, the Rostov and Voronezh oblasts. Various intelligence in the following months, including a statement from Russia news agency TASS, put the amount of troops situated in the southern military district which borders the Donbas conflict zone at 85,000 to 90,000. Despite the reassurances from the Russian government official that the troops pose no threat, Russian official Dmitry Kozak stated that the Russian forces will act to defend Russian citizens in Ukraine, and any escalation would lead to the beginning of the end of Ukraine. Other politicians such as German Chancellor Angela Merkel and United States White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki have made comments. Merkel phoned Putin demanding a reversal of a buildup, and Psaki describing the buildup as the largest since 2014. In late October, Russian agency TASS reported massive drillings occurring in the Astrakhan Oblast involving over 1,000 personnel and 300 pieces of military hardware, in the book S-300 and the Tor M2 missile system being present. On December 7, 2021, American President Joe Biden spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin via a secure video link regarding the buildup of Russian military presence and increase in tension on the Ukrainian border in response to Ukraine's intent to join NATO, which Putin described as a security threat. These tensions also come in line with the election of Volodymyr Zelensky, who has pushed back against Russian encroachment on Ukrainian sovereignty. During this video conference, Putin described Western military activity in Ukraine was approaching a red line, reiterating their threat towards Russian national security. Biden responded that the United States was ready to impose various economic sanctions more harmful than the post-Crimea annexation sanctions if Russia were to take military actions, most notably floating the possibility of cutting Russia out of the global financial telecommunication giant Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication, or SWIFT. However, European leaders feared that this step might provoke an even harsher response from Russia. On December 9, 2021, an incident occurred involving the Ukrainian command ship Donbas, which had set sail from the port of Mariupol at 9:12 Moscow time, heading towards the Kerch Strait, shared internal waters of Russia and Ukraine by treaty. According to FSB, the vessel did not reach to a request to a change course, but later headed back. The Russian Foreign Ministry labeled this incident as a provocation, whilst Ukraine dismissed the Russian grievance as part of the informal attack. Same day, Joe Biden called Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky regarding the tensions in the Donbas region and internal reform in Ukraine, with Zelensky issuing a statement thanking Biden for the strong support, while House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told reporters that the president's intention going into this call was to provide an update for President Zelensky on his call with President Putin and underscore our support for Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Despite these reassurances, Biden has stressed the idea that the United States is going to unilaterally use force to confront Russia from invading Ukraine is not in the cards right now, but that if Russia were to invade Ukraine, there would be severe consequences. On February 2022, Russia officially recognized the Luhansk People Republic and Donetsk People Republic, two Ukrainian breakaway states. On the same day, Putin ordered the deployment of troops to territory held by LPR and the DPR. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned that Russia is planning the biggest war in Europe since 1945, as Putin intends to invade and encircle the capital of Kyiv. On February 22, 2022, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he will consider the possibility of severing Ukraine's diplomatic relations with Russia. Although Russia had repeatedly denied any plans to invade Ukraine, the Russian army started an invasion on Ukraine on 24 February, with ground and air assaults across many parts of the country including the capital, Kyiv. President Zelensky announced that Ukraine cut all diplomatic relations with its eastern neighbor. On February 26, 2022, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukrainian soldiers were blocking Russian troops moving on Kyiv, while several Western nations acted on earlier proposed sanctions, cutting off a number of Russian institutions from the world's major financial payment system such as SWIFT. On March 5, 2022, according to the Russia RIA news agency, Russia's foreign ministry urged on European Union and NATO members to stop supplying arms to Ukraine. Moscow is particularly concerned that the portable anti-aerial Stinger missiles could fall into terrorist hands, posing a threat to planes, according to the report.
Ukraine versus Russia, an analysis. So Ukraine is a frontline state, and the struggle between European rule-based order and Russian kleptocratic autocracy. Since the Euromaidan revolution during 2013 up to 2014, Russia has deployed a range of measures, short of an open declaration of war, and it is to undermine Ukraine's aspirations to build an independent democratic system of governance and integrate into the Euro-Atlantic community. Russia is waging a full-spectrum war against Ukraine, exploiting domestic vulnerabilities to sow chaos and challenge the state. In this sense, Ukraine can be considered a political laboratory of Russian influence on a large scale. And Russian strategic intentions towards Ukraine have not changed since the start of the conflict during 2014. The Kremlin remains committed to keeping Ukraine weak, isolated, and under some form of control. On top of continuously discrediting democratic Ukraine, Russian propaganda efforts are now concentrating on depicting President Volodymyr Zelensky as a puppet of the West and a clown. Seizing the opportunity presented by the COVID-19 pandemic, Russian state media spins the story of the collapse of Western liberalism and depicts apocalyptic scenarios in Ukraine to increase panic, such as possible hunger protests, lack of cash in the economy, and the disintegration of the healthcare system. So this violent demonstration generated negative media coverage of Ukraine in leading international outlets and damage of the country's image. Fortunately, these major disruptions have not resulted in a nationwide disaster or state collapse. So despite Russia's aggression, economic pressure, and information war, Ukraine has managed to preserve its statehood, reclaim parts of territories captured by Russia-backed separatists, and roll out a comprehensive program of ambitious reforms. So Ukraine is attempting the equivalent of rebuilding a ship in heavy seas. And also, despite military conflict and an increasingly adversarial relationship with Russia, Ukraine has largely maintained its democratic reforms, and thanks to its resilience and determination to decide its own future. So the country is gradually developing the capacity of its state institutions and civil society to address the political and social consequences of Russian aggression. Meaning, almost 6 years of Russian aggression has demonstrated Ukraine's capacity to persevere against difficult odds. The country has proven more difficult to subjugate than the Kremlin expected. However, the struggle is far from over, and Vladimir Putin shows no sign of changing his objectives. So the armed conflict is likely to continue and will exert further pressure on Ukrainian society and politics for the foreseeable future. Volodymyr Zelensky's presidency represents a challenge for the Kremlin. His victory undermines the dominant Russian narrative that Ukraine is a nationalist and fascist country that discriminates against the Russian-speaking population and wants to destroy the Russian world. So this is the reason why Russia invades the Ukraine. This artificial threat is used to justify Russian interference in Ukraine's affairs. Until now, the Kremlin has also actively used anti-Ukrainian rhetoric and disinformation to dispel growing domestic dissatisfaction with the Russian government and to deter protests. So the Revolution of Dignity is portrayed as the main cause of disruption and chaos in Ukraine, a path that would supposedly lead to disaster if followed by the Russian people. So steady positive development of Ukraine could shatter these narratives. And Zelensky embodies a generational change and a new kind of politics that, if successful, could resonate widely in the post-Soviet region. So therefore, Moscow will likely increase its pressure on Ukraine.